The day I found the letter, I was cleaning out my father's attic. He had just passed 3 weeks earlier, and I was still walking through life in that foggy, hollow way you do when grief hasn't fully hit you yet. I wasn't ready for what I found. Nobody could be. It was a small envelope, white, creased like it had been held and held and held again, the way you hold something you can't bring yourself to throw away. My name was written on the front, in my mother's handwriting. My mother, who had been gone for 20 years. And it was dated the year I was born. I stood there in that dusty attic, the summer light cutting through a single cracked window, and I couldn't breathe. What was this? Why had my father kept it from me? Why, in 45 years, had he never once said a word? Let me back up. My name is Daniel. I'm 45 years old. I grew up in a small house in Akron, Ohio, the kind of neighborhood where the lawns were always mowed and nobody talked about anything real. My father, Robert, was a quiet man. Good, but quiet. He worked at the post office for 32 years. He mowed that lawn every Saturday. He never missed one of my baseball games. He was, by every definition I had, a good father. My mother, Carol, died when I was 25. Ovarian cancer. Fast and cruel. I didn't get to say much before she was gone. And after she died, my dad went quieter still. He never remarried. Never really opened up. I always thought it was grief. I thought it was just how he loved her. Silently, privately, completely. I had built my whole sense of self on these two people. On this family. My wife, my 2 kids, my whole idea of who I was. It was all rooted in that house in Akron, in those 2 people, in that story I had been told my entire life. By 45, I thought I knew who I was. I'd been through the hard stuff. A rough patch in my marriage 3 years earlier. A job I'd poured my soul into that had slowly ground me down to nothing. I was just starting to feel like I was finding my footing again. Like maybe the second half of my life could be better than the first. And then I found that letter. Have you ever thought you finally had things figured out? And then something came along and pulled the rug right out from under you? I didn't open it right away. I sat with it for 3 days. I carried it in my jacket pocket. I'd reach in, feel the envelope, and pull my hand back out. Something in me knew that once I read it, everything would change. And I wasn't sure I was ready for that. My wife, Karen, noticed something was wrong. She always does. We've been married 18 years, and those 3 years ago when we nearly fell apart, when she almost left and I almost let her, we came out the other side different. More honest. More careful with each other. She asked me what I was holding on to, and I couldn't answer. Because here's what was eating at me. My whole life I had always felt slightly out of place in my own family. Like I was watching the movie of my own life from one row back. My dad was fair-haired, blue-eyed, soft-spoken. I was dark, loud when I got passionate, restless in a way he never was. I'd always chalked it up to just being different, to taking after some distant relative. But now, with this letter in my pocket, the worst part wasn't not knowing. The worst part was the slow, terrible suspicion that I had always known something was off, and had chosen very carefully never to look too closely. I think a lot of us do that. We protect the story we need in order to keep moving. We don't ask the questions we're afraid to have answered. Have you ever avoided a truth because the lie was easier to live with? I'm not judging. I did it for 45 years. But that wasn't the worst part. What I found inside that envelope, I wasn't prepared for. Not even close. On the 4th night, I sat at the kitchen table after Karen and the kids had gone to bed. I made a cup of coffee I never drank. And I opened the letter. My mother's handwriting was soft and careful, the way she always wrote. And what she said in that letter broke me open in a way I don't have words for, even now. She wrote that she had been in love with another man before she married my father. A man named Thomas. She wrote that she had ended things with Thomas because she loved Robert, my dad, and believed he was the right choice, the stable choice, the good life she had always imagined. She married my father 3 months later. And then she wrote, Robert knows. He has always known. And he chose to love you the same. He chose you completely. I need you to know that the man who raised you chose to be your father every single day. That kind of love is not less. It is more. I read those words 4 times. 5 times. I sat in that kitchen until 2 in the morning, crying in a way I hadn't cried since I was a small child. Not just for myself. For my father. For this man who had quietly, without fanfare, without ever asking for credit, chosen me. Every single day. For 45 years. He never told me because he never wanted me to feel like I owed him anything. He never told me because, to him, there was nothing to tell. I was his son. Full stop. I want to tell you that I immediately felt peace. I didn't. At first I felt robbed. Angry. I had 45 years of my identity sitting on a foundation I hadn't known was there. And now the whole thing felt like it needed to be rebuilt. But slowly, over weeks, over long conversations with Karen, over quiet nights sitting in my dad's empty house before we sold it, something shifted. What my father did was not a lie. It was an act of love so large and so quiet that it had held me up my entire life without my ever knowing it was there. And what my mother wrote, in that letter she sealed and gave to my father, trusting him to decide whether I'd ever need to know, was the most honest thing I had ever read. She knew him. She knew he would protect me. And he did. To 45, I thought I was too old to be reshaped. I thought the man I was had already been formed, set, finished. But that letter cracked something open in me that needed cracking. It made me look at my own life, at the ways I had gone quiet when I should have spoken, at the ways I had let distance grow in my marriage, at the ways I had let my own kids wonder what I was thinking, and it made me decide to be different. My father chose me every day without saying a word. I want to be the kind of man who says the words out loud. I put his photograph on my desk. Not because I needed a reminder of what he was to me, but because I finally, completely understood what I was to him. It's never too late to understand the love you were given. And it's never too late to give it back. If this story touched something in you, something about family, or truth, or the quiet ways people love us, I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Maybe you've had a moment like this. Maybe you're carrying a letter of your own. Whatever it is, you're not alone. And if you believe it's never too late for a new chapter, for honesty, for healing, for becoming more of who you want to be, consider subscribing. There are more stories like this one waiting for you.